the big talking point today, and this will get you going, it's our top story. 4 years, can you believe, since the UK formally left the European Union.
So even though the country voted to leave by 52% to 48% in the referendum in 2016, the political turmoil continues to this day.
The row over post-Brexit trade rules for Northern Ireland has resulted in the absence of a functioning parliament for 23 months, although there's the hope that the DUP will return to Stormont maybe by this weekend.
Elsewhere, food and fresh flour imports from the EU will be subject to new custom controls from today as part of the government's plan to protect the country from biosecurity costs. That will be £300 million additional pounds.
So what we're asking you is, 4 years on, what do you have to show for it? Joining us now, former Labour MP and Minister of State for Europe, that's Denis McShane, who, of course, Denis, you would like to see us remain in the EU. And there's Suzanne Evans. Suzanne's a former Deputy Chair of UKIP, who says Brexit is the correct choice. Good to see both of you. Suzanne, can I just ask you, why is it the correct choice, and why do I personally not feel that I am being inundated with huge benefits as a result?
I can understand that, Eamon. I was also a former member of Vote Leave, the campaign that campaigned to leave the European Union. And of course, we made the massive case for Brexit. And unfortunately, I think we've had prime ministers since who haven't really taken advantage of it, which is a great shame. You know, we talked about taking back control of our borders, and clearly that hasn't happened. But what we have done is taken back our sovereignty, and we can make our own laws now, and we're not beholden to Europe. But again, I think perhaps that hasn't been exploited as much as it should have been. Certainly in terms of the money, we're certainly not sending anything like as much money to the European Union. We're still making a small contribution, but it's 85% less. So that's certainly something that's very good. But I think there's no doubt that, you know, the 2016 vote was still the largest democratic mandate in British history. The people said a resounding no to continuing EU membership. And that's something of which I'm still incredibly proud. And those Brexit benefits are still out there to be seized, as and when we have a government prepared to do that.
Gosh, OK, so Denis McShane, Suzanne clearly thinks it's missed opportunities, but I take it that you think it was just more of a con. And a lot of people still questioning where the money for the NHS is. Farmers aren't better off than they were promised that they would be. Most people feeling worse off, aren't they?
Look, Suzanne and I have debated this over the years, and I don't think we want to rerun the 2016 debates.
No, but it's a fresh argument today, isn't it?
Again this morning.
About whether
it's a good moment to reflect. I agree with her. Rishi Sunak's had to import 962,000 immigrants from India, Pakistan, Nigeria, principally, to replace all the Europeans who were part of our broad European culture who we booted out. It's been quite good news for passport makers. We now have our black passport with gold embossed symbols of Britain on the front. They're made in Poland, they were designed in France, and the gold embossed symbols wear off after a year or two. But the Irish government stepped in and generously given over 1 million passport to British citizens. So all of those, all the DUP MPs, you might be talking about that later, can now travel in Europe, work in Europe, buy a home, settle in Europe if they want, because anybody born on the island of Ireland is an Irish citizen. Business is going crazy with this. You just announced the new rules now for bringing in jamon de serrano from Spain, cheeses from France, Parmigiano from Italy. Hundreds of thousands of pounds of new bureaucracy that our firms have to face. I accept fully 37% of the British electorate, 37% of the registered electorate voted to leave Europe in 2016. I accept that decision. But to say that it was a great triumph for democracy when the majority of British voters did not vote for it is a little bit playing with the truth.
Is it going to get better, Suzanne?
Yeah, I hope so. I mean, sorry, but Denis is talking absolute rubbish here.
Insults.
What EU citizens did we boot out, Denis? We didn't boot any out. As you know, there was a long transition period in which we offered citizenship to any EU national who was already here. It's just crazy what you're saying. Businesses certainly can benefit from reduced regulation. And I think let's remind Denis, you might not want to rerun the arguments of 2016, but let's just remind people of what people like him were saying at the time. You know, that there'd be an immediate economic recession, that Scotland would leave the UK, that we wouldn't be able to do any trade with the European Union whatsoever, and business would leave Britain in their droves. I mean, none of that came to pass.
Suzanne, I wrote 5 boring books on Brexit, 5 very boring books. I'm not for a second suggesting that you start to read them. I never said any of those things. I kept saying Britain's a strong country. No, forgive me, Suzanne. I do know what I said, and I know what you said, and I don't want to. You're refighting 2016. Today, the London Stock Exchange has got 25% fewer listings on it, with all our too many big firms moving to New York. We are not getting the imports. We've had to close down 2 giant blast furnaces, putting thousands of people out of work in Wales, because we're not exporting as we should be.
OK. Dennis, let Suzanne have her say.
Again, it's picking your facts, isn't it, Dennis? Yes, you're absolutely right. The stock exchange has suffered some loss of listings, but actually, if you look over a 10-year period, what's happened has been, there was a report out yesterday saying that actually it's average over a 10-year period. We've done trade deals with New Zealand, with Japan. We joined the Trans-Pacific Trade Group, the CPTPP, which is going to benefit us enormously over and above because we couldn't have joined that group.
But I'll tell you what, you can't get anybody to work in your local pub or your local restaurant as well,
Picking
Suzanne.
fruit in the farms.
And I've got a small beef because I'm a grandfather now since Brexit. I don't say the two are connected, of course, Suzanne, don't get me wrong. But my 2 daughters can't get an au pair because the government has stipulated such high salaries. Now, I know you'll say,
you can sneer about that, but au pair is actually a very affordable way of managing childcare and enabling women back into the workplace. Yes. And we know that the huge cost of nannies and nurseries in this country. So I think the sneering isn't really necessary.
A lot of British young women went as au pairs. We've lost our Erasmus programme that allowed hundreds of thousands of school leavers.
But is that not back on again?
No, your Horizon's back. That's the scientific research
Sadiq Khan's talking about bringing that back into London.
No, but he can't do that. I mean, bless Sadiq. I heard him make that speech. I'm not going to criticise him. But you can't do that without agreement with all of the EU. Britain can't unilaterally announce anything like this. Now, Kemi Badenoch, to be fair, it was said we're going to replace all EU regulations with Made in UK regulations, and the Commons and Lords were bogged down on this earlier this or late last year. She's just said, I'm not going to do any of that. So Kemi is being, like Rishi Sunak,
she's not said she's going to do any of that at all. Some of it has been delayed, specifically at the request of these businesses who apparently are all having problems, Dennis. So I'm sorry, you can't see on the one hand she's not doing something and then saying business is suffering. You know, this is the way of the world, and things have to be negotiated.
She's cooperating with Europe as Rishi is.
Make your mind up
today,
there.
We've got the very good news from Northern Ireland that the DUP have finally accepted they're going to have to live under EU rules. That is excellent for the people of British people of Northern Ireland. It's excellent they have a right to an Irish passport. I just wish in Britain we could give some of those rights to people born here in England.
Well, I'm sorry. I mean, I think, Dennis, I'm sorry you're rerunning the arguments again. You can't get over the decision. You absolutely hate that you were on the wrong side of history. And what can we say? I mean, so far, all I've heard from you is one great big whinge, I'm afraid.
Well, you're just insulting me. That's your argument. I haven't insulted you. You're just rude to me.
All right. Look, guys.
Never going to agree.
You're going to get people talking, certainly, today, and a lot of views coming in. GB.
Got a couple, actually. I can just literally the first couple that have come in. I plan to emigrate to France to work as a nurse. I plan to buy a place out there as I speak fluent French and property's cheap. France needs nurses. My option now is to work in Geneva. And this one about EasyJet. Since Brexit, EasyJet's had to move its base to Europe, losing loads of jobs. And this is from Paul Brodel, who says he's a hotel owner. Whereas Ian Palmer says, we've done Brexit, move on.
OK. Suzanne, thank you. Dennis, thank you very much indeed for getting people talking today.